After I became a millionaire, an anonymous deposit appeared under my maiden name. I'm Eleanor Hartwick. I built Hartwick Capital Management from a single office in downtown Boston into one of the country's most respected private investment firms. 33 years of analyzing numbers, predicting patterns, understanding the hidden language of money. I'm known for my precision. My clients trust me because I see what others miss. But that Tuesday morning, staring at my laptop screen in my Beacon Hill townhouse, I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. The deposit had arrived at 4:47 a.m. $2 million. Wired to an account I'd opened decades ago under my maiden name, Eleanor Prescott, an account I'd almost forgotten existed. No sender information, no wire instructions, just a reference number that meant nothing to me, and an amount that made my hands shake as I held my coffee cup. The morning light came through the tall windows, catching the crystal chandelier my late husband had bought me for our 20th anniversary. Everything in this house spoke of careful accumulation, deliberate choices, the kind of wealth you build with your own intelligence and discipline. This deposit felt like something else entirely. Something from a part of my life I'd closed the door on long ago. Before we continue, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. Like this video, so this story reaches more hearts, and subscribe for the next journeys. I'd been Eleanor Hartwick for 31 years. Eleanor Prescott existed in a different lifetime, before the MBA, before the firm, before I learned that loving someone meant choosing them over and over, even when it meant walking away from everything you thought you'd be. I called my assistant and told her to clear my morning. She didn't question it. I never cleared my mornings. In my study, surrounded by mahogany shelves heavy with financial journals and first editions, I pulled out the file box I kept in the back of my closet. Inside were papers I hadn't touched in years. My original Social Security card with Prescott typed across it. My college diploma. A photograph I couldn't quite bring myself to look at directly. The account had been opened in 1993. I remembered the day clearly, standing in that small bank branch in Cambridge, 23 years old, newly graduated, believing I was about to change the world. I'd kept the account active all these years with minimal balance, some part of me unable to completely erase that version of myself. But who would send money to that name, to that account? My phone buzzed. My daughter Catherine, texting from her brownstone across town. "Mom, can we talk later?" Something came up with Dad's estate papers. My chest tightened. Thomas had been gone for 2 years. The estate had been settled completely, meticulously. I'd made sure of that myself. I looked back at the screen. $2 million. Anonymous. Under a name that belonged to a woman who'd made choices I'd spent 3 decades not quite forgiving myself for. The reference number blinked at me. PP 1993 Trust Final. PP Prescott. But trust? Final? I felt something cold settle in my stomach. There were things I'd never told Catherine about those years before I became her father's wife. Things I'd never told anyone. Private decisions made in small apartments and library study rooms. Choices that seemed necessary at the time but that I'd wrapped in silence as the years passed and my life took shape around a different story entirely. Outside, Boston moved through its rhythms. The business district waking up, the harbor catching morning light. Inside, I sat very still, realizing that money, which I'd always understood completely, had just arrived to tell me a story I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. Someone knew something. Someone had been waiting. And after all these years of building this careful, successful, precisely managed life, the past had just deposited itself into my present with mathematical certainty. I picked up my phone to call my attorney, then set it down again. Because whoever sent this knew exactly where to find Eleanor Prescott. And that meant they knew exactly who she'd been. The smell of bergamot tea filled my study as I sat there, the cursor blinking on my screen like a heartbeat. I'd built my entire career on following the money trail. Every transaction tells a story. That's what I taught the young analysts at my firm. Follow the pattern, trace the source, understand the intent. But this money felt different. It felt like a message written in a language I'd deliberately forgotten how to read. I pulled up the account history. The Eleanor Prescott account had sat quietly for years, holding exactly $1,247.63, leftover scholarship money I'd never transferred. The kind of forgotten account that exists in the margins of a busy life. Now it held over $2 million. My phone rang. Catherine again. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the photograph I'd retrieved from the file box. I still couldn't look at it directly, but I placed it face down on the mahogany surface. Its presence there felt like an accusation. The morning stretched on. I should have been at the office. Tuesdays meant portfolio reviews, client calls, the structured rhythm that had defined my professional life. Instead, I sat in my townhouse, watching dust particles drift through the sunlight, thinking about 1993. That year, I'd been someone else entirely. Eleanor Prescott, brilliant and idealistic, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in economics and a fellowship offer to Oxford. Everyone said I had a gift for numbers, for seeing market patterns before they emerged. I was going to be different, a woman who made it on pure intellectual merit, who needed nothing from anyone. I'd been so certain of everything back then. My laptop chimed with an email notification. My attorney, Robert Chen, responding to a message I didn't remember sending. My hands must have moved on autopilot. Eleanor, I can look into the wire transfer. Do you have any suspicion about the source? These amounts typically come with documentation unless they're structured to avoid scrutiny. Let me know if you want me to dig deeper. RC. Did I want him to dig deeper? I stood and walked to the window. Beacon Hill spread below me in neat rows of brick and history, every building holding its own carefully maintained secrets. I'd chosen this neighborhood deliberately when Thomas and I moved back to Boston. Old money, quiet dignity, the kind of place where people understood discretion. The reference number glowed in my mind. PP 1993, Trust Final. Trust. That word carried weight I wasn't ready to examine. I made myself return to my desk and open the file box completely. Inside were documents from my other life, my acceptance letter to Oxford, dated June 1993, a lease agreement for a studio apartment in Cambridge I'd signed that summer, a medical receipt, the details of which I still couldn't bring myself to read even after all these years, and beneath those, a letter. Cream-colored stationery, elegant handwriting, never sent. Dear Eleanor, I understand why you made the choice you did. I want you to know that I'd never finished it, never sent it. The person it was meant for had made their own choices, and I'd made mine. And by August of 1993, we'd become strangers moving in opposite directions. My coffee had gone cold. I walked to the kitchen, poured it out, made fresh. These small rituals of wealthy domesticity, the Italian espresso machine, the imported cups, the filtered water, sometimes I still couldn't quite believe this was my life. That Eleanor Prescott, who'd lived on instant ramen and library vending machine coffee, had become Eleanor Hartwick, who owned a townhouse worth $4 million. But someone still remembered Eleanor Prescott, someone who had access to $2 million and the knowledge of where to send it. I thought about calling Catherine back. My daughter, 30 years old, brilliant in her own right, working in environmental law. She knew Eleanor Hartwick, the composed venture capitalist, the widow who'd built something substantial, the mother who'd always been present but somehow never fully available. She didn't know Eleanor Prescott, the young woman who'd loved someone completely and then walked away, who'd made a choice that still woke me sometimes at 3 a.m., wondering about different lives, different versions of myself. The deposit sat there, waiting. 2 million reasons to look backward when I'd spent 30 years moving relentlessly forward. I picked up the photograph, finally. Forced myself to look. 2 faces, younger than I could quite believe now. Summer 1993, outside the economics building at Harvard. We were laughing at something, caught mid-joy, believing the future was ours to shape however we wanted. I'd been so wrong about what the future would require. My phone buzzed again. Not Catherine this time. An unknown number. Boston area code. I stared at it, heart suddenly racing, and realized I'd been waiting for this call for 31 years. I didn't answer. The phone stopped ringing. No voicemail. Just silence rushing back into the study like water filling a space. My hand was shaking. I set the phone down carefully, precisely, the way I did everything. Controlled, measured, deliberate. These were the qualities that had made me successful. These were the qualities I'd cultivated to replace the impulsive, passionate person I'd been at 23. Eleanor Prescott had made decisions with her heart. Eleanor Hartwick made them with spreadsheets and risk assessments. But the money didn't care which version of me opened the account. I looked at the photograph again. That girl's face. My face. So open. So undefended. I'd learned to arrange my features differently over the years. Clients trusted composure. Boards valued certainty. Thomas had loved my steadiness, my ability to manage anything without visible strain. "You're like a swan," he told me once, early in our marriage. "Graceful on the surface, even when you're paddling hard underneath." He'd meant it as a compliment. I'd smiled and thanked him, and never told him that sometimes I felt like I was drowning in plain sight. The unknown number called again. This time I answered. Eleanor Hartwick. Professional. Cool. A pause. Then a woman's voice. Older. Careful. "Ms. Hartwick, my name is Patricia Moreland. I'm an attorney with Whitmore and Associates. I'm calling regarding a trust distribution to an account under the name Eleanor Prescott." My throat went dry. "I see. The trust was established in 1993 with specific instructions for final distribution upon certain conditions being met. Those conditions were satisfied last month. I have documents that require your signature to complete the transfer." I closed my eyes. "Who established the trust?" Another pause. Longer this time. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information over the phone. The trust documents are sealed. But I can tell you that the beneficiary is listed as Eleanor Marie Prescott, and our research confirms that you are that person. Would you be available to meet at our office? The documents explain everything." Everything. That word hung in the air like smoke. "What conditions?" My voice sounded strange, distant. "I really should explain in person, Ms. Hartwick. These matters are sensitive in nature. The individual who established the trust wanted to ensure privacy." I pressed my fingers to my temple. A headache was forming behind my eyes, the kind I hadn't experienced in years. "When can I come?" "Would tomorrow morning work? Say, 10 o'clock? Tomorrow. 12 hours to prepare myself for whatever this was. 12 hours to remember how to be Eleanor Prescott again, even briefly. I'll be there." She gave me an address in downtown Boston, near the financial district. Of course, even my past couldn't escape the geography of money. After I hung up, I sat very still. The townhouse felt different somehow, as if the walls had shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. Everything I'd built here, the career, the reputation, the carefully maintained life, suddenly felt provisional, temporary. As though it had always been waiting for this moment when the past would arrive to claim what was owed. I thought about Thomas, gone 2 years now. Our marriage had been good, stable, respectful, built on shared values and genuine affection. He'd never pushed me to reveal more than I wanted to share. When we met in 1994, I was already Eleanor Hartwick in spirit, if not yet in name, already becoming the woman who could build an investment firm, who could analyze risk without flinching. He'd never asked about the shadows I carried, and I'd never offered them. But now I wondered, had he known? Had he seen the places in me that remained carefully locked, the version of myself I'd left behind in Cambridge in the summer of 1993? I picked up the unsent letter again, read the words I'd written 3 decades ago. Dear Eleanor, I understand why you made the choice you did. I want you to know that The sentence ended there, unfinished. Because what could I have said? That I supported their decision even as it broke something in me? That I was choosing Oxford, choosing my future, choosing ambition over the messy, complicated reality we'd created together? That I was sorry? That I wasn't sorry? That I didn't know how to be both things at once? The letter was addressed to someone whose name I could barely let myself think, even now. Someone who'd held my hand in that Cambridge apartment and said, "Whatever you decide, I'll understand." And I'd decided. Chosen. Walked away. The trust had been established in 1993. That same summer. That same impossible summer when everything changed and nothing would ever be the same again. Someone had been planning this for 31 years, waiting for specific conditions to be met, protecting something or someone with $2 million and a sealed document. I stood and walked through my townhouse, touching surfaces. The marble countertops in the kitchen, the silk curtains in the drawing room, the first edition books Thomas had collected. All of it real, solid, proof of the life I'd actually lived. But in my study, that photograph sat on my desk. 2 young people laughing, believing they could have everything, believing love and ambition could coexist without sacrifice. We'd both been wrong. I looked at the clock. 4 p.m. Catherine would be leaving her office soon, probably heading to yoga or meeting friends for wine. My daughter, who thought she knew her mother's story, who thought Eleanor Hartwick had always existed, fully formed, certain and successful. I should call her, prepare her somehow. But for what? I didn't even know yet what I was preparing myself for. The unknown number was saved in my phone now. Patricia Moreland, attorney, keeper of sealed documents and 31-year-old secrets. Tomorrow morning, I would sit in her office and learn what conditions had been met. What had finally triggered this distribution. Why someone had been holding $2 million in trust for Eleanor Prescott all these years. And I would have to decide, once again, who I was going to be when the truth finally arrived. Outside, Boston moved into evening. Streetlights flickered on. Somewhere in this city, documents waited with my name on them. Both my names. Ready to explain everything I'd spent 3 decades trying not to remember. I poured myself a glass of wine, something I rarely did before dinner. My hands were steadier now, but inside I felt like that 23-year-old girl again, terrified, certain, making choices that would echo for the rest of my life. The money sat in the account, patient and implacable. Tomorrow, I would find out what it was trying to tell me. Tonight, I would sit with the photograph and remember what it felt like to be Eleanor Prescott, before she learned to become someone else entirely. The Whitmore and Associates office occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. I arrived at 9:53 a.m., 7 minutes early, wearing my charcoal Armani suit, the one I wore for difficult board meetings, for moments that required armor. Patricia Moreland was exactly what I'd imagined. Mid-60s, silver hair pulled back, reading glasses on a chain. She stood when I entered, extended her hand with professional warmth. "Ms. Hartwick, thank you for coming." The conference room was all windows and pale wood, the kind of expensive neutrality that cost more than it appeared to. She'd laid out a folder on the table, cream-colored, thick with documents. "Before we begin," she said, settling into her chair, "I want to acknowledge that this may be emotionally difficult. The individual who established this trust was very specific about timing and conditions. They wanted to ensure you were in a certain place in your life before this information reached you." My mouth went dry. What place? Financially secure, established, no longer vulnerable to the kind of pressures that might have influenced your decisions in 1993. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. She opened the folder. "The trust was established on August 15, 1993, by Dr. James Whitmore. He was my father. He passed away last month at the age of 89. The name meant nothing to me." I shook my head, confused. "Dr. Whitmore was a professor of economics at Harvard," she continued. "He specialized in behavioral economics and decision theory. Do you remember him?" And suddenly, I did. Professor Whitmore. The graduate seminar I'd taken my senior year. Tall, elegant, sharp as broken glass. He'd written me a recommendation letter for Oxford. We'd had coffee twice to discuss my thesis on risk assessment in emerging markets. "I remember him," I whispered. "But I don't understand." She slid a document across the table. A letter, handwritten on Harvard letterhead, dated August 10, 1993. "Dear Ms. Prescott, you came to my office yesterday seeking advice about an impossible choice. You were crying, though you tried to hide it. You told me about the fellowship to Oxford, about the future you'd planned, about the pregnancy you'd just discovered, about the person you loved who had offered to build a different life with you if you stayed. You asked me what I would do. I told you what any rational economist would say, that you should optimize for long-term utility, that you were 23 and brilliant, that opportunities like Oxford don't come twice. But after you left, I sat in my office and thought about my own daughter, about the choices she might face someday. And I realized I'd given you only half the answer. I'm writing this because I suspect you'll choose Oxford. You'll choose your future. And I suspect that choice, however rational, will cost you something you can't measure on any spreadsheet. So I'm establishing a trust. My investment portfolio has done well these past years. I'm placing $2 million in it, to be held until certain conditions are met. Until you've achieved the financial success you're capable of. Until you no longer need anyone's support. Until you're secure enough that money can't pressure you into any decision. And then, when that happens, I want you to receive this amount, not as charity, but as a gift from the person whose choice you made possible. Because after you left my office, someone else came to see me. A young man, 24 years old, also brilliant, also devastated. He asked me to help him set this up. He wanted you to know, someday when you were ready, that he understood. That he never blamed you. That he took the path you made possible for him and built something beautiful with it. He made me promise not to tell you until he was gone. He didn't want this to be a burden, didn't want you to feel obligated to reach out or explain or justify. He just wanted you to know, eventually, that the choice you made, the one that hurt both of you so deeply, gave him a life he was grateful for. The trust will be released to you upon his death, provided you've achieved financial independence. He was very specific about that. He wanted you to receive this only when you truly didn't need it, when it couldn't be mistaken for anything other than what it is. A thank you, an acknowledgement, a way of saying that your sacrifice mattered. Sincerely, James Whitmore. The letter blurred. I couldn't breathe properly. Patricia Moreland's voice came from very far away. "The other benefactor's name is in the sealed section. My father's instructions were clear. You'd know who it was. The trust conditions were met last month when he passed away. Cancer. Very peaceful, according to his family." I looked up at her, tears streaming down my face without permission. "His family?" She nodded gently. He married in 1995. 2 children. Both grown now. He became a professor himself, economics like my father. Published several important papers on decision theory and game theory. Had a good life, from what I understand. A happy one. The room was spinning. That summer. That terrible, beautiful summer. The pregnancy test in the tiny Cambridge bathroom. His face when I told him. The way he'd held me without hesitation, without blame. "We can do this together," he'd said. "We can build something amazing." And I'd said, "I can't. I'm sorry. I can't." Because Oxford was waiting. Because I was 23 and terrified of disappearing into someone else's life. Because I'd worked so hard to get there. And I couldn't see how to have both. The future I'd planned and the future we'd accidentally created. We'd sat in that apartment for hours, talking, crying, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. Finally, he'd said, "I understand. Whatever you decide, I'll support it." And I'd chosen. Made the appointment at the clinic. Gone alone because he'd offered to come. But I couldn't bear it. Couldn't bear his kindness when I was taking everything from both of us. I'd left for Oxford in September. Buried myself in research, in numbers, in building the foundation of who Eleanor Hartwick would become. I never knew he'd gone to see Professor Whitmore. Never knew about this trust, this impossible gift. "He wanted you to know," Patricia said softly, "that you gave him his life. The one he actually lived. He told my father that if you'd stayed, he would have loved you. But he would have always wondered. And you would have wondered too. He said the hardest gift you ever gave him was the freedom to become who he was supposed to be." I pressed my hands to my face. 31 years. He'd been alive all this time, living in the same world I was, building a life, teaching students, having children. And he'd arranged for this moment, for me to know, after he was gone, that he'd forgiven me, that he'd understood, that the choice I'd made, the one that still woke me at 3 a.m. some nights, had somehow been right for both of us. "There's one more document," Patricia said. She slid another envelope across the table. "He wrote this 5 years ago, when he first got sick. My father was still alive then, still managing the trust. He wanted to make sure you received it with the distribution." My hands shook as I opened it. "Dear Eleanor, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope that doesn't make you sad. I've had a beautiful life, and you were part of making that possible. I think about that summer sometimes, how young we were, how terrified, how certain we had to choose between love and future, as if they couldn't coexist. We were both wrong about that, but we were also both right. You needed to become who you are. I needed to become who I am. And we couldn't have done that together, not then, not at 23 when we barely knew ourselves. I want you to know, I never regretted our choice, either of them. I hope you didn't either. This money isn't about the pregnancy. It's not guilt or obligation or anything painful. It's simpler than that. It's a thank you for setting me free to find out who I was supposed to be. For being brave enough to choose yourself when you needed to. For trusting that we'd both survive it. We did, didn't we? I hope you're happy, Eleanor. I hope you built something extraordinary. I hope you found love that fit the life you created. Thank you for the gift of that impossible summer, and for the gift of letting me go. With gratitude, Michael. His name on the page broke something in me that had been holding for 31 years. Michael Chen. The graduate student I'd met in Professor Whitmore's seminar. Brilliant, kind, with eyes that saw through every defense I'd built. We'd fallen in love over coffee and equations, believing we could solve any problem if we just thought hard enough. But some problems don't have solutions. They only have choices, and we'd both chosen. I sat in that conference room and wept. For him, for us, for the children we'd never had, and the life we'd never built. But also, strangely, for the rightness of it. The way sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that set everyone free. Patricia handed me tissues without comment, let me cry until I was empty. Finally, I looked up. Was he happy? She smiled. My father said he was one of the most joyful people he'd ever known. Always laughing. Brilliant teacher. Completely devoted to his wife and children. He lived well, Ms. Hartwick. You gave him that chance. And he'd given me mine. Oxford. The fellowship. The research that became my dissertation. That launched my career. That turned Eleanor Prescott into Eleanor Hartwick. I'd built something extraordinary, just like he'd hoped. And somewhere across the same years, he'd done the same. 2 parallel lives, both full, both real, both made possible by one terrible necessary choice. There's paperwork, Patricia said gently, to complete the transfer. But there's no rush. Take the time you need. I nodded, unable to speak. Outside the window, Boston Harbor sparkled in morning light. Somewhere in this city, Michael's family was grieving. His wife, his children, the life he'd actually lived. And here I sat, finally receiving his forgiveness for something I'd never quite forgiven myself for. The money didn't matter. The $2 million was just paper, just numbers. But the message it carried, that had weight I could finally accept. We did the right thing, both of us, and it's okay now. I gathered the documents with shaking hands, ready to leave, to process this earthquake that had just reshaped 31 years of memory. But I wasn't ready yet. Not quite. Because there was still Catherine. And she deserved to know who her mother had been before she learned to become someone else entirely. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked. Down through the financial district, past the buildings where I'd closed deals and built my reputation, toward the harbor where the city opened into sky and water. The documents were safe in my briefcase. Michael's words folded carefully inside, already becoming part of me in ways I didn't yet understand. The October air was sharp, carrying the smell of salt and coffee from the harbor cafes. I found myself at a bench overlooking the water, the same place I used to come when Thomas was sick, when I needed to think through impossible problems, money problems I could solve, portfolio allocations, market fluctuations, risk management. These had clear answers, mathematical solutions. But this required something I'd spent 30 years avoiding. Honesty, the messy, vulnerable kind. I pulled out my phone and called Catherine. "Mom?" She sounded surprised. I rarely called during business hours. "Everything okay? Can you meet me? There's something I need to tell you." A pause. "You're scaring me. Are you sick?" "No, sweetheart. Nothing like that. But it's important. Can you come to the harbor? The bench near the aquarium. I'll be there in 20 minutes. I sat holding my phone, watching boats move across the water, and thought about all the things I'd never told my daughter. Not lies, exactly. Just careful omissions. The way I'd presented my life as a smooth, upward trajectory. College, Oxford, meeting her father, building the firm. A clean narrative with no detours, no moments of fracture. Catherine deserved better than that. She deserved to know that her mother had once been young and terrified and had made choices that still echoed. She arrived wearing her work clothes, navy blazer, efficient heels, her hair pulled back the way I wore mine. So much of me in her face, in the way she moved through the world with quiet competence. "Mom?" She sat beside me, concern evident. "What's going on?" I took a breath. Before I met your father, when I was 23, I was someone different. Eleanor Prescott. That was my name then. She nodded slowly. I know. Your maiden name. There are things about that time I never told you. Not because I was ashamed exactly, but because I didn't know how to talk about them. How to explain choices I made before I understood who I would become. Catherine's hand found mine. You're really scaring me now. I was pregnant, I said simply. The summer before Oxford. There was someone, Michael. We were in love. And I had to choose between him and the fellowship. Between the life we could have built together and the future I'd been working toward. Her grip tightened. She didn't speak. I chose Oxford, and I chose not to have the baby. Michael supported my decision, but it ended us. I went to England, and he stayed here, and we never spoke again. The words hung in the salt air between us. Catherine's face was very still, processing. I met your father 2 years later, I continued. He was kind and steady, and he gave me a life I'm grateful for. I loved him, Catherine. Truly. But there were parts of me he never knew, because I'd locked them away. Because I thought being Eleanor Hartwick meant leaving Eleanor Prescott completely behind. Why are you telling me this now? Her voice was quiet, careful. I pulled out Michael's letter, handed it to her. Because he died last month, and he left me something. Not just money, though there's that too, but a message. After 31 years, he wanted me to know that the choice I made, the one that hurt us both, gave him a beautiful life. He married, had children, became a professor, and he never blamed me. Catherine read the letter slowly. I watched emotions move across her face. Surprise, sadness, something that looked like recognition. When she finished, she looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed older. You've been carrying this alone all these years? I thought I had to. I thought successful people didn't have messy pasts, didn't make painful choices. I thought if I just worked hard enough, built something substantial enough, I could outrun the parts of myself that felt uncertain. Mom. She shook her head. I'm a lawyer. I work with people making impossible choices every day. Did you really think I'd judge you for making one when you were barely older than I was when I graduated college? And that's when I broke. Not the tears I'd cried in Patricia Moreland's office, but something deeper. Relief. The kind that comes from finally putting down weight you've carried so long you forgot it was heavy. Catherine put her arms around me, right there on the harbor bench, and I let myself be held by my daughter, who was somehow wiser than I'd given her credit for. I thought I had to be perfect, I whispered. For you, for Dad, for everyone. You were human, she said. That's better. We sat like that while boats moved across the water and the city breathed around us. Finally, Catherine pulled back, still holding my hands. Can I tell you something? She said. Dad knew. I stared at her. What? Not the details. But he knew you'd had a life before him, that there were things you didn't talk about. He told me once, a few months before he died, that everyone has a past, that the person you were when he met you was already complete, not broken, not needing fixing. He said he loved you for exactly who you were, mysteries included. Fresh tears spilled down my face. He never said anything. Because he understood you needed privacy, that some things are ours to keep if we choose. She squeezed my hands. But Mom, you don't have to keep everything. Not from me. Not anymore. I looked at my daughter. 30 years old, brilliant, compassionate, whole. She'd had her own struggles, her own choices. A relationship that ended badly in her 20s. The decision to focus on her career before marriage. She'd been more open about her path than I'd ever been, and I'd envied that freedom sometimes, without understanding where it came from. "You're braver than I was," I said. "No. I just had a mother who taught me that success and vulnerability aren't opposites, even if she didn't quite believe it herself yet." We walked together along the harbor after that, and I told her everything. About Michael. About that summer. About the abortion clinic in Cambridge where I'd sat alone in a waiting room, making a choice I believed was right, but that cost me something I'd never quite name. About Oxford, where I'd thrown myself into research so completely that Professor Whitmore wrote me notes telling me to sleep more. About meeting Thomas at an economics conference in London, how solid he seemed, how safe, how I'd loved him differently than I'd loved Michael, but no less truly. About building the firm, about all the years of proving myself, of being excellent, of constructing Eleanor Hartwick into someone who never wavered, and about this morning, when the past arrived in the form of a trust distribution and a letter from a man I'd loved 31 years ago. "Do you regret it?" Catherine asked. "Any of it?" I thought about that. Really thought. "I regret the pain," I said finally. "His and mine. But the choice itself? No. Because he was right. We both needed to become who we were supposed to be, and we couldn't have done that together, not then. Would you have done anything differently?" "I would have been gentler with myself," I said. "I would have understood sooner that making a hard choice doesn't mean you're hard, that you can be both strong and wounded, that success doesn't require perfection." Catherine smiled. "You're learning that now. At 61. Better late than never." We stopped at a cafe, ordered coffee, sat in a window booth watching Boston move through its afternoon. My daughter asked questions, thoughtful ones, kind ones, and I answered honestly. Not the polished version of events I'd constructed over the years, but the messy truth. "What will you do with the money?" she asked finally. I hadn't thought about it. $2 million. The amount seemed both enormous and irrelevant. I don't know yet. Maybe something that honors what Michael gave me. A scholarship fund, perhaps, for young women facing impossible choices. Catherine nodded slowly. "I think he'd like that." "Tell me about him," I said suddenly. "You read his letter. What did you see?" She was quiet for a moment, choosing words carefully. "Someone who loved you enough to let you go, who understood that the best gift is sometimes freedom, who wanted you to know, even after he was gone, that your choice mattered." "Yes, that was exactly right." "I think," Catherine said, "you gave each other something rare, the chance to become yourselves without guilt. That's a kind of love too, isn't it?" I looked at my daughter and saw Thomas in her thoughtfulness, myself in her precision, but also something entirely hers. This wisdom about love and choice that she'd cultivated in ways I never had. "When did you get so smart?" I asked. She grinned. "Genetics. Also, I had a mother who showed me what strength looks like, even when she thought she was hiding." The afternoon stretched toward evening. We talked until the cafe started filling with the after-work crowd, until the light changed from gold to blue across the harbor. Finally, Catherine said, "Are you okay? Really okay?" I considered the question honestly. Was I? "I'm sad," I said. "For Michael, for the life we didn't have. But I'm also grateful that he gave me this gift, that I can finally stop wondering if I ruined both our lives with that choice." "You didn't ruin anything. You chose yourself. That's not selfish, Mom. That's survival." And somehow, hearing it from her, my daughter, the person whose existence depended on the path I'd taken after Michael, made it true in a way it had never been before. I'd survived that summer. Both of us had. We'd chosen ourselves when we needed to. And then we'd built lives that mattered, separately, fully. The grief was real, but so was the rightness of it. Catherine walked me back to my car, hugged me hard before I left. I love you, Mom. All of you. Eleanor Prescott and Eleanor Hartwick and whoever you're becoming now. I held her tight. Thank you for letting me be imperfect. Thank you for finally letting me see it. I drove home as twilight settled over Beacon Hill, the documents from Patricia Moreland's office resting in my briefcase like seeds waiting to become something new. The money would transfer. I'd sign the papers. And then I'd figure out what to do with this gift Michael had left me. Not the dollars, but the permission. Permission to remember, to grieve, to finally forgive myself for being 23 and terrified and human. The townhouse welcomed me with its familiar quiet, but it felt different now, less like a museum of who I'd become, and more like a home where all versions of myself could finally coexist. I made tea, put on music, something I rarely did, sat in my study and looked at that photograph again. 2 young people, laughing, believing they could have everything. We'd been wrong about that, but we'd each gotten something worth having anyway. The next few weeks moved differently. I signed the papers at Patricia Moreland's office, and the money settled fully into the Eleanor Prescott account. $2 million with Michael's name written invisibly across every digit. I left it there, untouched, while I figured out what it wanted to become. But something else was shifting. Something harder to quantify than trust distributions and legal documents. I started sleeping better. The 3 a.m. wake-ups that had plagued me for years. The ones where I'd lie in the dark replaying that summer, wondering about different choices. Those stopped. Not immediately, but gradually, the way ice melts when spring finally arrives. Catherine called more often. Not with purpose exactly, just to talk. She told me about a case she was working on, about a woman fighting for custody after leaving an abusive marriage. She keeps apologizing, Catherine said, for not being perfect, for making hard choices. I keep telling her that survival isn't something to apologize for. You sound like someone I know, I said. I learned from someone smart. The word settled into me like warmth. All these years, I'd thought I was teaching Catherine how to be strong by showing her only my polished surfaces. But maybe what she'd actually learned was something deeper. That strength includes acknowledging wounds. That success doesn't require erasing your past. I went back to work, but I noticed myself doing things differently. In a meeting with a young analyst who'd made a calculation error, instead of my usual crisp correction, I said, "Walk me through your thinking." And when she explained, I recognized myself at 25, brilliant and terrified of making mistakes. These numbers matter, I told her. But so does learning to forgive yourself when you miscalculate. The best investors aren't the ones who never make errors. They're the ones who learn from them without letting fear paralyze them. She looked at me with something like relief, like I'd given her permission to be human. My partners noticed too. At our quarterly review, Marcus Chen, no relation to Michael, though the name still made my heart skip, said, "You seem different lately, Eleanor. Lighter somehow." I smiled. Maybe I'm just finally learning what matters. One Saturday morning, I drove to Cambridge. I hadn't been back to that neighborhood in decades, had actively avoided it, taking routes around instead of through whenever business brought me near Harvard. But now, I parked near the economics building and walked the paths I'd walked at 23. The campus looked different. New buildings, renovated spaces, but the bones were the same. The library where Michael and I had studied together. The cafe where we'd had our first real conversation about game theory and optimal outcomes. The bookstore where he'd bought me a first edition of The Theory of Moral Sentiments, because I'd mentioned loving Adam Smith. I stood outside the old apartment building where I'd lived that summer. Someone else's life happening behind those windows now. Someone else making choices they'd carry forward. I didn't feel haunted anymore, just connected to that version of myself, to Michael, to all the invisible threads that link who we were to who we become. I walked to the economics building and found Professor Whitmore's name on a plaque in the lobby. In memory of James Whitmore, whose dedication to his students extended far beyond the classroom. Beyond the classroom, into trust funds and sealed letters and the careful architecture of second chances. I touched the brass plate gently. "Thank you," I whispered. That evening I did something I'd never done before. I opened my laptop and searched for Michael Chen. Not to find him, he was gone, but to see the life he'd built. There were photos. Professional headshots from the university where he'd taught. A faculty bio listing his publications, his awards, his research interests, decision theory, behavioral economics, the mathematics of choice. He'd spent his career studying the very thing that had defined our summer together. And then I found an obituary, written by his family, full of love and specifics. Survived by his wife Jennifer, his daughter Amy, his son David. Predeceased by his father, remembered for his kindness, his brilliant mind, his terrible jokes that made everyone groan and laugh anyway. There was a photo of him at what looked like a family gathering. Older, silver-haired, laughing with his arms around two young adults who had his eyes. He looked happy, genuinely, completely happy. I sat at my desk and cried, but this time the tears felt clean, like rain washing something away that had been there too long. He'd been happy. We'd both been happy, in the lives we'd built separately. The choice had been right. I pulled out my journal, something I'd started keeping again recently, another shift, and wrote, "Dear Michael, I received your letter, your gift, your forgiveness. I want you to know that I built something too. A firm that matters, a daughter who's wiser than I was, a life that felt complete, even when I was carrying the weight of that summer. I married a good man who loved me without needing all my answers. I achieved the things I was chasing when I left you, and I'm grateful for all of it. But I'm also grateful for you, for understanding when I couldn't explain, for letting me go when staying would have destroyed us both, for waiting 31 years to tell me it was okay. I forgive you too, though you never asked for it, for being so kind that leaving you felt like tearing myself in half, for offering me a different life when I wasn't ready to receive it, for making the choice so hard that I've spent decades wondering if I got it wrong. I didn't get it wrong. We both got it right. Thank you for the gift of knowing that. Thank you for living well. Thank you for being happy. I hope wherever you are now, you know that the girl you loved in 1993 became someone she's finally proud of, and that she never forgot you. Not once, not ever. With love and gratitude, Eleanor. I didn't send it anywhere. There was nowhere to send it. But writing it felt like completing something that had been unfinished for 31 years. I closed the journal and looked around my study. The first editions, the financial journals, the photograph that now sat in a silver frame on my desk instead of hidden in a box. This was my life. All of it. Eleanor Prescott and Eleanor Hartwick. The choices I'd made and the ones I'd avoided. The loves I'd found and the one I'd let go. I picked up my phone and texted Catherine. What would you think about starting a foundation together? For young women facing impossible choices. Scholarships, counseling, support. Her response came immediately. I think that's perfect. Let's do it. I smiled. The money had found its purpose. Michael's gift would become someone else's second chance. And I had found mine too. Not in the dollars, but in the permission he'd given me to stop carrying the weight of wondering, To finally, after 3 decades, believe that the choice I'd made in that Cambridge apartment had been mine to make, and that making it hadn't destroyed anything. It had set us both free. Outside, November darkness settled over Beacon Hill. But inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace, complete and simple. The kind that comes from finally telling the truth. To your daughter, to yourself, to the ghost of a love you carried longer than you carried the relationship itself. I was 61 years old, a millionaire many times over. Successful by every measure I'd once thought mattered. But this quiet certainty that I was finally, fully myself, this was the real wealth, and it had arrived exactly when I was ready to receive it. 3 months later, on a February morning sharp with winter light, Catherine and I stood in a conference room at Harvard, unveiling the Michael Chen Memorial Scholarship Foundation. The room was full. Students, faculty, Patricia Moreland with her quiet smile. And in the front row, a woman about my age with kind eyes and 2 young adults who looked achingly familiar. Jennifer Chen, Amy, and David, Michael's family. I'd reached out through Patricia a month earlier, unsure if they'd want to meet me. Unsure if I had any right to enter their grief with my own complicated history. Jennifer had written back within days. Michael told me about you years ago. He said you were part of why he understood that love sometimes means letting go. I'd be honored to meet you. Now she stood and embraced me, and I felt 31 years of wondering dissolve in that gesture. He spoke of you with such respect, she said softly. He never called it regret. He called it gratitude. I couldn't speak, could only nod. Amy stepped forward, her father's eyes looking at me with curiosity and warmth. The foundation is beautiful. Dad would have loved this. He made it possible. I managed. All of it. The presentation was simple. Catherine explained the structure. Full scholarships for women pursuing graduate studies in economics, with additional support for those facing personal crises. Counseling services. Mentorship programs. A network of support for students navigating impossible choices. My mother taught me, Catherine said, looking directly at me, that strength isn't the absence of struggle. It's what you build after the struggle is over. This foundation exists because 2 people made a hard choice 31 years ago, and then spent their lives proving that hard choices don't have to mean bad outcomes. The audience applauded. But I was watching Jennifer, who had tears streaming down her face. Afterward, we gathered in a smaller room. Just the families. Jennifer, Amy, David, Catherine and me. Patricia Moreland, guardian of secrets and architect of this impossible reunion. I want you to know something, Jennifer said, holding my hands. Michael and I had a beautiful marriage, 34 years. But he was always honest with me about his past, about you, about that summer. He said you taught him that love doesn't always look like staying. Sometimes it looks like being brave enough to walk away. He taught me the same thing, I whispered. I just took 31 years to learn it. David spoke up, his voice gentle. Dad talked about decision theory all the time. How every choice creates a different timeline, a different life. He used to say that the goal wasn't to make the perfect choice, but to make your choice perfect by how you lived with it. Yes. That was exactly what we'd both done. Amy pulled out her phone, showed me a photo. Michael in his office, surrounded by books, that same brilliant smile. This was taken a month before he got sick. He was working on a paper about optimal outcomes in non-zero-sum games, about situations where both players can win, even when it looks impossible. I looked at the photo and saw the boy I'd loved, aged into the man he'd become. Happy, complete, whole. We both won, I said quietly. It just took me a long time to see it. We talked for hours. They told me stories about Michael, his terrible puns, his love of cooking, the way he'd turn every family discussion into a game theory problem. I told them about Oxford, about building the firm, about the years of wondering if I'd made the right choice. "You did," Jennifer said firmly, "and so did he. Look at what you both built. Look at your daughter, my children, the lives we've all lived. None of that was a mistake, Eleanor." Catherine and Amy exchanged numbers, already talking about collaborating on the foundation. David asked me about investment strategy with genuine interest. Slowly, impossibly, our separate lives began weaving together in ways that felt inevitable. Before they left, Jennifer handed me a small box. "Michael left this with his papers. Instructions to give it to you if we ever met." Inside was a book. The first edition of The Theory of Moral Sentiments he'd bought me in 1993. I'd left it behind when I went to Oxford, unable to carry reminders. On the title page, in his handwriting, "For Eleanor, who understood that sympathy sometimes means setting someone free. Thank you for the gift of becoming myself. M." I held the book against my chest and finally let myself cry in front of Jennifer. Not with grief or regret, but with the overwhelming relief of being fully seen, fully forgiven, fully understood. She held me like we'd known each other for years. Maybe, in a way, we had, both loving the same complicated, brilliant man from different timelines, different choices. "He was lucky to have you," I said when I could speak. "We were all lucky," she replied. "The four of us in this room exist because you and Michael were brave enough to choose yourselves when you needed to. That's not tragedy, Eleanor. That's grace." Grace? I'd never thought of it that way. But standing there with Michael's wife, his children, my daughter, I felt it. The strange, perfect grace of hard choices that turn out right in ways you could never predict. That evening, Catherine and I walked along the Charles River, the same paths I'd walked with Michael 31 years earlier. "Are you okay?" she asked. I thought about the question. Really thought. "I'm better than okay," I said. I spent 31 years carrying the weight of that choice, wondering if I'd ruined both our lives. And today, I learned that we both built something beautiful with the freedom we gave each other. That the sacrifice wasn't for nothing. It was never for nothing, Mom. You became you. That matters. We stopped at the bridge, watching the water catch the last of the winter light. I pulled out the book Jennifer had given me, ran my fingers over Michael's handwriting. "Thank you for the gift of becoming myself." "I need to tell you something," I said to Catherine. "When I made that choice, to end the pregnancy, to go to Oxford, to leave Michael, I thought I was choosing ambition over love, success over connection. I thought I was being selfish. And now? Now I think I was choosing survival, my own and his. We were 23. We barely knew ourselves. If we'd tried to build a life together then, we would have spent it wondering who we might have been." Catherine nodded. "Instead, you both became exactly who you were meant to be. And you exist because of that choice. If I'd stayed with Michael, you wouldn't be here. Your father wouldn't have had the love he deserved. Michael's children wouldn't exist. All of our lives spun out from that one impossible decision. So it wasn't the wrong choice or the right choice," Catherine said. "It was just your choice, and you made it perfect by how you lived with it." David's words. Michael's philosophy. The truth we'd both finally arrived at. I looked at my daughter, brilliant, compassionate, whole, and felt something shift completely. The last piece of guilt, the final whisper of what if, dissolved into the winter air. "I'm proud of who I am," I said. "All of it. Eleanor Prescott and Eleanor Hartwick. The woman who made hard choices and the woman who built something beautiful anyway. I'm proud of you too, Catherine said, for finally letting yourself be both. We walked back to the car as darkness settled over Cambridge, but I didn't feel haunted anymore. Didn't feel the weight of ghosts or regrets, just gratitude, deep and clean and simple. After I became a millionaire, an anonymous deposit appeared under my maiden name, and it taught me that wealth isn't always measured in dollars. Sometimes it's measured in forgiveness, the kind you give others, and the kind you finally, after 31 years, give yourself. The foundation would launch in the fall. We'd help young women facing impossible choices, give them resources and support, and the message that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Michael's legacy, my second chance. Our shared understanding that sometimes the hardest gift is setting someone free. I drove home to Beacon Hill that night with the book on my passenger seat, and Catherine's voice still warm in my memory. The townhouse waited. No longer a museum of who I'd become, but a home where all versions of myself could finally rest. I placed the book on my desk next to the photograph. 2 young people laughing. 2 middle-aged people building separate, beautiful lives. 2 timelines that had finally, impossibly, woven back together in a conference room at Harvard. And I understood at last what Michael had known all along. We hadn't lost anything that summer. We'd given each other the most precious gift, the freedom to become ourselves. The money sat in the account, ready to transform into scholarships and second chances. But the real gift was simpler than that. It was permission. To forgive myself. To honor the choice. To finally, after 31 years of wondering, believe that hard decisions and beautiful outcomes can coexist. That you can choose yourself and still choose love. That sometimes setting someone free is the deepest form of devotion. After I became a millionaire, an anonymous deposit appeared under my maiden name, and it gave me back the one thing I'd been missing all along: peace with the woman I'd been, gratitude for the woman I'd become, and the certainty that both versions deserve to exist without apology. If this story touched you, leave your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments and subscribe for the next journey.